Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Morcellini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. Robert Dugoni is back again. And if you listen to the podcast at all, you know he's absolutely one of my favorite authors. And he's back today to talk about his latest Kira Dugan book. We actually covered the first book, Her Deadly Game, on the podcast. So this is the sequel or the second edition. I don't know how you want to word it, but this is the second time we get to see this character. First, let me say welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
I read it. I loved it, as I do all your books. I mean, I think they all bring something different to the table. But this was really unique, right? I'm not going to do any spoilers because I don't want to ruin the read for anyone, but um even I'll say it's a really different ending, right? I didn't see the ending coming the way it laid out. Let's put it that way. So I think if you like a good courtroom thriller, it was absolutely that, right? You get to see the investigation and the steps along the way, of course, but most of the end of the book is all trial, which is my cup of tea. And if you like a good trial, I mean, you're not going to be disappointed. But it's just kind of a surprise ending. I thought it was really unique. So how did that come to you? I mean, did you know all along you wanted to do something so unique, or did it just happen,
But, you know,
naturally, organically at the computer?
yeah, no, for me it always just happens. And I'll be honest, I spent probably a good month uh thinking of a way to make the ending more shocking. Um and sort of at the suggestion of my editor, who we were talking about it, and she loved the ending but thought, I wonder if. And an ending of a book, I have found, has to be satisfying to the story that's told, but it also has to be satisfying to the reader.
Mm.
And the ending that my agent was suggesting, or at least proposing that I kick around, was not going to be satisfying to my readers. So after a long period of time where I really tried to make something else work, I felt what worked. Um, it's unique in that, and I don't want to give any spoilers either, but not everything wraps up in a neat little bow in life. That's just the way it is. In books, readers love to see things wrap up into neat little bows. And I understand that. So I try to compromise, basically. But I wanted it to be true to the story, and I wanted it to be true to Kira, because
Mm.
I felt the most important thing is that Kira needed to come off as sharp, smart, and resilient.
Oh, agreed. I mean, sure. I mean, you're ultimately building a much longer picture for her, right? I mean, while this is a little snapshot into one person's story, Kira's gonna, and I hope to see Kira involved in, thousands of more stories after that. So I think you did have to stay true to the character that you were building, which you absolutely do. It was unique. I've never seen an ending quite like that, right? You get to the end and you're like, wow, this is
Yeah,
different. This is
yeah.
really unique, and it was satisfying. Um, I thought, I mean, I love Kira. I love what she's doing, but it helped propel the story for me. That Jenna was so unlikable. I found her unlikable anyway, right? There comes a point in time when um, you always want to root for the person. Like Jen is the person she's defending. We'll say that. And she's also a childhood friend. Uh, well, I think the blurb may call her a frenemy, right? Uh, but yeah, she's somebody that Kira grows up with, that like those kids that you think of as maybe friends, but you never really got along with them, but you for some reason or another always pushed into the into a scenario where you were around that kid, but you never really liked that kid so much. I mean, that's more of their background, I think. But Jenna is unlikable to me. I didn't care for the character, but it made the dynamic of her representation of her that much more interesting, right? And it
Yeah, I
made me
mean,
think. It made
yeah,
me
I mean,
think.
books are about protagonists and antagonists, and I don't want to. I don't always want to make okay. The antagonist is a police officer, or it's a legal thriller, right? Or the detective's a bad guy. To me, I don't think that's true in 95% of the cases out there. And B, in the 5% of the cases it's true out there, I think it's been beaten to death. And I don't want to write stories that basically have been beaten to death. So, you know, um, this is one of those situations that I think a lot of lawyers face and a lot of people in general just face, which is when in the lawyer's case, you have to defend somebody you really don't like.
Mhm.
You really don't like this person for whatever reason. And Kira, as an adult, tries to give Jenna, the adult, the benefit of the doubt. But more often than not, continues to resort to who she was growing up, which is someone that was used to getting her way, someone that wasn't afraid to use her physicality to get what she wanted, someone that wasn't afraid to manipulate people.
A
Uh,
master manipulator, you'd
Master
say.
manipulator. And I had cases against people that I'm certain were sociopaths. And
Yeah.
they're scary individuals because they are so convincing in the lies they tell. I mean, you can take a deposition and they will look you straight in the eye and lie to you. And all you can do is let them lie. As your natural reaction is to say you're lying and point it out to them. But the best thing you can do is just let them continue to lie, continue to lie, continue to lie. And that's what Jenna is. Jenna's a liar. So I wanted a situation where you didn't have an unreliable narrator. You basically had an unreliable client. And Kira, for the longest time, doesn't know what is true and what isn't true. Um,
Making this read all the more fascinating.
Yeah, but she's got a job to do. I once had a criminal attorney, Phil Margolin, who's a writer, down in Portland, and he had defended, I think he said 31 capital murder trials. So 31 instances in which his client was going to get the death penalty. And 31 times he was successful in not getting the death penalty. His client went to jail for the rest of his life, but he won. And I said, "So your client was guilty?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely." And I said, "Well, I mean, how do you deal with that as a lawyer? How do you deal with it?" He said, "It's not my job to decide whether he's guilty or not guilty. It's not my job to get him off. My job is to ensure that his constitutional rights are protected while he's on trial." And that's what I did. Now, I can't change the facts that he killed a human being, but I can make sure that in prosecuting him, that they stick to the letter of the law because that is a benefit to everyone in society. That the letter of the law is complied with, and I thought that was a really interesting take on it, because too often as lawyers, as you know, too often as lawyers, it's all about winning.
Yeah.
I just wrote the third book in the Kira series. It's going to be coming out. It's called Her Cold Justice, and it's about that very premise. That it's all about winning, but at what cost?
Mm.
And so often we have to stop ourselves. I don't do it anymore, but back when I was practicing law and say, no, I have to turn over this document. No, I have to disclose this expert that doesn't agree with my theory of the case. I mean, whatever it is, you have a duty to be ethical.
Right. You're
A lot
at
of
the end of the
lawyers,
day, you're an officer of the court, right?
and a lot of attorneys, as you probably come in your own experience, but I know in my experience, there was a lot of attorneys that weren't ethical. It was all about winning.
Yes.
And that's especially true in the civil cases where, somebody's trying to make a dollar. So, I try to play with those axioms, if you will, and you know, get people. I think the most important thing is to get your reader interested, so that they'll keep reading and say, okay, what the hell is going on here, and how is this going to turn out?
Yeah, well, I really liked that. I agree that she's somewhat of a sociopath, Jenna. And I used to have a college professor in psychology, right, who talked about sociopaths, psychopaths, in the same term. Um, that they were the truly the most dangerous of the group of mental or abnormal psychology, mental disorders you can have because they walked freely among us,
Yeah,
right? Like you would never really be able to tell. There are people married to sociopaths that don't really know. It's hard to pick out. They're very good at mimicking even emotions, where they study like what does a normal person do at a funeral? They cry. Like they're very good at copying what
yeah,
looks like normal behavior and blend in quite well.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, they have no regard for people, even the ones that are in their close circle. You think like, well, they have to be bonded to the parents but they're just not capable of feeling love outside of them for themselves.
yeah. I had a
Um,
really interesting experience. I was in Florida one time, and the short of a long story is I ran into this guy that was down at the beach that had an unusual tattoo. So I started talking to him, and it turned out that he was a prison guard at San Quentin. And so I said to him, "Hey, can you?" And he goes, "Yeah, you want me to tell you about Charles Manson?" And I started laughing, and I said, "Hey, I was actually going to ask you about that." And he said, "Yeah, I knew Charlie." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "So how was he?" And he said, "He was as sane as you or me." He said all the shit he did on TV and everything, that was an act. That was a total act. And he'd come back like after the Geraldo Rivera interview, he'd come back to his prison cell and I'd say to him, Charlie, what the hell was that all about? And he goes, I'm just giving the people what they want. And it was really interesting because for whatever reason, I was on this thing, and they had a snippet of Charles Manson being interviewed in a defense table, and he very, very convincingly said, "I've never killed anyone. I'm in prison because I'm a petty thief. I stole a couple cars. I hijacked a convenience store once." And he went through the list. He said, "But I never killed anyone." He said, "If I wanted to kill people, you'd all be dead." And I mean, he said this with such conviction. That's the scary part.
Mm.
He said it with such conviction. And I remembered what that prison guard had said to me was, he's not crazy. He's perfectly capable of calculating all the stuff that he does. And that's what he does. Scary, really, really scary.
Well, so that's what I thought, you don't get to see that in many books, right? Not as an ordinary character, right? She's somewhat of an ordinary character in the middle of this story, right? I mean, while she's the driving force and that's who she's representing, there aren't a lot of books that, somebody who you can pretty quickly identify as to who she is and, what she's about. But she's a driving force, an ordinary character in the body of this story, and you don't get to see many characters like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting, different, another unique thing about the book.
Yeah, I mean, I learned from a television series, a British television series called Pennyworth, and it's about Alfred, Batman's butler, before he becomes Batman's butler, and he's in the MI6, a very capable guy. And what I learned from that television show, the ending got really hokey, but the first 3 or 4 seasons were really interesting. Is they never killed the bad guy, and I started to realize that to create antagonists, good antagonists, is really difficult. It's really a hard thing to do. And this show was very, very good at keeping the antagonist going from season to season. You would lose, kind of like Game of Thrones, you would lose protagonists, but you never lost a good antagonist. Um, and there's some books that I've written that I say to myself now, man, I wish I had kept that person alive. Or
Sure.
what if that antagonist had somehow gotten away and they don't know whether he or she is alive or dead? And so, is Jenna somebody that I can see coming back? I don't know, but I just I felt like she was really good, and I just wanted to I wanted to sort of let her. I wanted the reader to not know when Jenna was talking whether she was telling Kira the truth or not the truth, because that's really what has been my experience with, and it sounds like with you as well. That's been my experience with sociopaths is, the first minute you begin to feel sorry for them or empathy for them is when they begin to take advantage.
Yeah, very good at that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the scary part. And even recently, more recently in my life, I have someone that I'm pretty sure is sociopathic. And I've had a couple of instances with this individual where I just had a hunch something just is not right here. And just ironically, the person reached out to me just the other day. And I just was like, I'm not even going to go down that path, because I don't have a good sense about this.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, I thought that was another interesting choice, and I thought it made the book unique as well because you don't get to see, other than like you're talking about Batman, but a lot of those characters are villains. Villains to me can be over the top sometime.
Hmm.
Even in just your ordinary thriller, right? Oftentimes you'll get a serial killer or you'll get somebody who's a little over the top in terms of, and that's the best word for them, villain,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like, I don't want to say it's cartoony, but I mean, it sort of has that vibe occasionally when it's a little too much. And so I appreciated, just the mix of ordinary into because you see much more of that in the real world, don't you?
Yeah, I once had the opportunity to do an event with Anne Rule, who wrote True Crime, and has passed. But I remember she wrote the book on Ted Bundy, and she said the scariest thing about Bundy was, she did work with him on a suicide hotline, and she did think he was this really nice young man. Now there was a rumor that she allowed him to babysit her daughter, her teenage daughter. That was never true. Anne said that never happened. However, one of the scariest things she said to me was Bundy maintained his innocence. He constantly maintained his innocence. When he was reapprehended in Florida after killing, I don't know how many college students, two, three, I don't know. He was in trial, and she went down to cover the trial, and she still thought he was innocent. She thought this guy he's not capable of doing what they're saying that he did. And that's how convincing he was. And then they put, back in the day, they didn't have the DNA type of stuff they have now. So they put a dentist on the stand to testify to the bite marks that were left on the victims, because Bundy would bite his victims.
Mhm.
And the dentist said, I comparing this is the defendant's bite marks. And Bundy was sitting at a counsel table. Anne was in the gallery, and he turned around and he looked at her and he went, now tell me that wouldn't freak you out. In other
That
words,
would freak me out.
he was saying, "Got me."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that's a sociopath. The difference between a sociopath and a psychopath is a psychopath will kill. Sociopaths generally take advantage of people but don't kill, my understanding, through I forget what she was called. I referenced her in one of my David Sloan novels, but she was a she used to go in and interview and try to medicate and shit, all the people in prison. But I remember she said to me, I said to her, "So what medicine do you put a psychopath on?" And she looked at me like I was just the most naive little kid in the world. And she said, "Oh, no, no, no." She says, "There is no medication. There is no therapy. There's only prison." I mean, and that was it.
Yeah.
There was no helping those people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow, that's really interesting. I also didn't know there was a distinction between the terms sociopath and psychopath. I always thought they were somewhat the same,
Yeah, I think they are, but I
interchangeable.
think the distinction, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the distinction is The difference is a psychopath will kill. A sociopath necessarily takes advantage of people because he thinks people are put on this earth to be taken advantage of because they're too stupid to not be taken advantage of. But a psychopath will actually kill. I had another really interesting situation happen one time where um, I was at a conference in Wisconsin, and one of the speakers was the woman that wrote the book about the BTK killer in Kansas, I believe, the horrible man that would bind, torture, and kill
Yeah.
women. And it was really interesting because shortly thereafter we had those horrible murders of college students in Idaho. And I'm sitting there looking at the news, and suddenly she's on the TV and they're interviewing her because the guy that is accused of killing those college students was in one of her classes, one of her seminars that she was giving on how to identify psychopaths and what their common traits are, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, talk about scary, right? I mean,
Yeah. That's the whole thing my psych professor had once said, right? They walk amongst us.
yeah, yeah,
Very hard to pick up.
yeah,
So I think we're scaring everybody now, but
yeah.
everyone's looking to the right and left. It's also a unique, and I was wondering where the overall topic comes. I mean, because you delve into what is, I think, biotech,
Mhm.
uh, I'm not even sure what the area of field you label this, but it's a very unique uh overall concepts in science that you talk about. Again, another unique thing about the book. That's why I think the word of the day for your book, when I finished it, I said unique.
Yeah,
And
thank
it
you.
was unique in so many ways.
Yeah,
But where did you get the idea for the book? Or maybe you can talk a little bit about the scientific
sure.
underlying
Sure. I mean, a
concept.
lot of people relate it to I can't remember the woman's name, but the woman that was had a company, Elizabeth something. But she had a company where she was trying to say that from a drop of blood they could diagnose whether you had blah 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 blah. And she was she was she was accused and convicted of basically stretching the truth. Uh,
Yeah.
she's now serving time. That
She's
really
doing
wasn't it.
infomercials, I think, too, right?
Yeah, that really
Yeah.
wasn't it at all. My idea came from my friend Dr. Dan Bruzak. He's a great guy. And I said to Dan, I have this idea where I want to write a story where I have a sociopath and she's running a company that is preying on people's dreams, people's needs, wants, desires. And Dan has had Parkinson's disease for 17 years. He is one of the most unique individuals I've ever met in my life. He still golfs. And that's how I know Dan is we golf together. And he's brilliant. He's a brilliant man. And Dan said to me, "Okay, let me get back to you." And what he found was, and I said, I want something that's kind of on the cutting edge, but really isn't there yet. And so he directed me to what's called tissue nanotransfection, TNT, which is there's at the University of Ohio, I believe it's the University of Ohio, um, there is a group of, biotech people that are studying the ability to take skin cells and through a device to be able to electrify those skin cells at the nucleus level and change them into other cells. So, for instance, cells that repair wounds, cells that deliver dopamine, cells that deliver other, not chemicals, but other things we have in our body to help with dementia and all that kind of thing. So, really cutting edge stuff. The military is highly interested because they can heal wounds much faster than normal. And so, obviously, there's also talk that, the biggest killer in the United States is heart disease, that you'd be able to have cells that regenerate and send those in. And so if you have a damaged heart or a valve, they would regenerate and the organ would be rejuvenated. So really cutting edge stuff and really almost Star Wars type stuff or Star Trek type stuff, right? And so that's all I needed is I just needed a company like that that could restore people's almost restoring their youth. So I call it Ponce de Leon, restorative
Yeah.
technology kind of a thing. Um, and that's what I wanted because there really is in Silicon Valley and up here in the biotech, there was for the longest time, there were these companies that would basically say, make fake it until you make it. In other words, get people to invest in the idea and let them think that you're going down this path, you really want to do it. And I think 99% of the companies are legitimate, but you have that 1%, right? Fake it till you make it. These people can be very powerful. So my thought was, what happens if you have a sociopath that's in charge of one of those companies? And unbeknownst to me, when I started doing the research, that's not uncommon. Sociopaths often are CEOs. Sociopaths often are trial lawyers. They put themselves in positions of authority, and then they can take advantage of the people around them to make millions and billions of dollars. So that's really where the idea came from.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when I first started reading it, it was almost I was like, does this really exist? I mean, is
Yeah,
this like, because it seemed so, like you said, Star Wars is so like out into the future. 300 years from now, they're gonna look back and be like, hey, they didn't know about that back then. It
yeah,
had that, vibe to it. But it actually is, a lot of us, especially those who are not too into science, are truly not up on what is being developed in labs, all across the world. The kind of things that are being looked into, especially for cures um, and for health. I mean, most of all for health, but for just a buffet of different reasons. There's scientific experiments going on and different things being developed. So I thought, wow, this is something that, like you said, I guess it's cutting edge. It's out there. It's being, thrown around, uh, and and it felt like a true moment in the book, like when you finally really get the idea of the charlatan effect. I'll call it that. Like the charlatan effect truly of what's happening and the power of that. I liked that as one of the themes of your book. I mean, because it's there as an undercurrent, right? And there's so many people selling what amounts to hope. Um,
exactly. That's the best word for it. They're selling hope. Yes.
and is there the science to back it up? And I guess, there might be, and eventually you'd like to think that many of these things will come to fruition. But at the stage that, of course, they're talking about the science wasn't quite there yet for what they were selling, and I liked that. I liked that big light on that charlatan effect of the whole thing, um, because you don't. Again, that's not the common crime, right? Most of the crimes in a lot of legal thrillers or a lot of the books are very typical murders, oftentimes murders that revolve around some personal um, event. I mean, sometimes a lot of the books, especially the ones I've been reading lately, were based in a serial killer theme,
Mm.
who's just truly crazy out there killing, just for the art of it. That seems to be their only reason. I read a lot of that. It's common. And but then there's the other half, where you see, like Columbo used to say, well, every time there's a murder, I find it's, look to the wife or look to the husband or look to the somebody. So there's some bad behavior that went on that ultimately led to a bad thing happening.
Yeah,
Uh,
detectives call it grounders,
yeah.
right? It's a ground ball. It's an easy play. It's an easy out. They get the guy, he's a gangbanger and he's got the gun in his hand. The husband is in the house and the wife is in the bed dead. And that is 99% of the murders out there is they're grounders. They can figure it out. The ones that, are truly scary are the ones where, there is no link, there is no connection. The guy in Idaho, as far as I know, there was no link to these college students, although there's some indication that he liked one of them, one of the girls. I don't know exactly. And there is also some indication that that's the reason he took that class is because he just wanted to see if he could get away with it. I think we'll find out if he's ever actually tried and it goes to trial, etc. But but yeah, they're the exception. They're the rare situation where someone just kills, kind of for the heck of it. I think that people are much more interesting um, when they don't kill. There's what was that movie? No Country for Old Men.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and it's based on a novel. Oh gosh, the guy that has won so many awards is just going in and out of my head here. But there's an actor in there, and he goes into a convenience store, and there's this old man in there, and he's simply trying to help this guy. And this guy's crazy. He's a socio or a psychopath, but he doesn't come off that way. And then he starts saying to the old man, basically, when he starts basically, playing with this guy. He basically tells him to pick heads or tails on a coin. And this guy has no idea what's going on. He's just this nice old man, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And you know that if he picks wrong, this guy's going to kill him. And he picks right. And the guy just kind of smiles at him and kind of gives him an indication like, you don't know how close you came, and turns around and walks out. I mean, that's much more terrifying to me, because this guy is literally just toying with this kind old man. And I think those are the really sort of unique characters in literature, or, Silence of the Lambs,
Mm.
he's brilliant, he's brilliant, he's cunning, he's intelligent. And that last line in that movie when he says, I'm gonna go, how does he say it? I'm gonna see an old friend for dinner, or I'm gonna take an old friend to dinner or something like, what that means, that's terrifying. So
Terrifying.
it's funny because I've had people say to me some of my novels are dark, and I'm really not a dark writer. I don't write about the actual killing. I don't write about, somewhat. Uh, um, I
Oh
write.
no, they're not gory at
No, they're
all.
not. I guess that's a better word. They're not gory. But anytime you have a situation where you have a person like Jenna Bernstein, it's dark because it's scary that there are people out there that exist like that.
Yeah. Agreed. But that's what I mean, I really thought from beginning to end, like the science thing, you don't see that much. The motivations in most of the murder mysteries or thrillers are very different, right? This was again unique, unique, unique. Unique in that this wasn't a typical, who was sleeping with who, and
Yeah.
that's, just some ugly mess, and it wasn't some bizarre serial killer. Um, that comes out of nowhere that's a stranger to everybody, kind of watching from the bushes. It wasn't that. It was something that potentially is real. You had the character being defended who ordinarily you're supposed to root for, right? The person on the edge of society who no one else will help, and then the attorney comes along on his or her white horse and helps the person, and then you have this, fantastic cheering ending. And none of that is true in this book,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think, as that's just not the way 99% of cases end. Uh,
It's
you know,
real. It's
I was a
so
civil
real.
lit yeah, I was a civil litigator, and I can remember, you sign settlement agreements holding your nose, because it's never a victory. That's the bottom. And I used to tell clients that at the very beginning is that, you're gonna end up holding your nose because you're gonna have to give on things that you think you're right on, but you're never gonna win. And it's going to be really hard for you. And they tell you up front, no, when it comes to that, if you recommend that I take this, I'll do. And then it gets to it, and they don't want to do it. They don't want to admit that. But I'm right. Yes, you're right. But do you want to spend $100,000 and go to trial? Pay me $100,000 and go to trial to win 50,000? And some of them would say, yes, I do. I'd say, okay, then we'll do that. But they have to know up front that anytime you're in a lawsuit, you've already lost.
Yeah. Those are truer words.
Yeah,
Because the reality is, and it's like trying to talk to a client about mediation, right? When you say, well, you're better off spending the money to pay a mediator, who you're going to get to see in 2 months. Potentially you can settle it, or even an arbitrator, who can make a decision, but you've pulled the Band-Aid off. It's over with quickly. You've saved a ton of money. Um, and still you'll have clients who want their day in court. And you're like, okay, well, that's going to happen 3 years from now, $150,000 later, and you can wind up still owing what they're looking for now, and
yeah,
maybe more,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
it's frustrating. I was very frustrated as a lawyer because, I come from a family of five brothers, and it was win or lose, and it was really hard. The best,
Survival of the fittest.
yeah, I mean, the best lawyers that I encountered were the lawyers that wasn't they could take their ego, they could divorce their ego from it. I think that'd be even more difficult in criminal cases. There was a guy that he just became sort of a TikTok sensation of all things. The guy's name, I think, was Wade Wilson, and he's the guy that killed those two women in Florida. And it became sort of he got sentenced to death, and it became sort of this hot button issue about psychological illness, that this guy had a psychological illness that was just propelling him down this dark, dark tunnel. Every time he showed, he was a big guy. He got bigger because he's lifting weights, probably taking steroids. And all these women loved him because he was incredibly good looking. So you had this dichotomy going on of this horrible human being that had killed two women, strangled them.
Oh yeah, isn't this the one that then like the women are like proposing to him?
Yes, on
Yeah,
TikTok and
yeah,
stuff. And he
yeah.
became sort of this celebrity. And then they thought he was giving signals, that there was this he claimed that there was this group out there that in the government that knew everything about. I mean, it was just crazy stuff. Anyway,
He
he
tattooed
was
his face now or something.
yeah, and he started to have more and more tattoos, all it
Yeah.
just but he was put to death. Um, but the thing about it was just how many people out there he fooled, how many women out there he fooled. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible human being. And you had people that were, proposing to him, that he just they had talks of his in prison when he would call his girlfriend, I guess I don't even know, and I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. But these people exist because there are people to prey on. And that's
Sure.
what he proved is there were people to prey on, and he preyed on them. Scary, very
Right.
scary.
So that's, I mean, I think you took a lot of themes, right, and put them together here. I mean, there is that, like I said, that the charlatan selling hope, sort of theme running throughout. There is the sociopaths walk amongst us,
Yeah.
theme kind of running, and there's also the life doesn't always turn out like you plan, theme kind of running throughout, which just again, it's just gritty and interesting, and I always enjoy sitting down with one of your books, right? Because you never
Thank
know
you.
exactly what you're going to get, whether it's going to be a little piece of historical fiction like the last book you were here on, um, or where you're going to start with your little seedling, and where you're
Yeah.
going to take us, but it's always something different and interesting, and I feel the people are very real. I like the pacing very much of your books, because nothing seems rushed or formulamatic, I guess, throughout. It just seems like you're telling a story, and I'm down for that.
Yeah, I have a really good team behind me, and they're really good about helping me with pacing. I have a developmental editor, and she's just really, I think she's really brilliant. And she and I will fight on things. This scene doesn't add anything. Well, yeah, no, it really doesn't add anything. Yeah, no. And then in the end, I go, yeah, you're right, it really doesn't add anything. And I end up, cutting pages. So I try to keep the books as tight as possible. I mean, people have limited time, in terms of their leisure time. And so, for me, I always start out, the book will be 430 pages. It'll be 100,000 words. It comes out 400 page in the end, 400 pages, 90,000 words. Almost inevitably in every mystery thriller I've written, I would be willing to bet you within 1,000 words, it's 90 to between 90 and 93,000 words, 400 pages. Because more than that, for me, I'm usually padding, and I don't need to pad. But when you first start writing, you think to yourself, "Oh my God, I got to fill 400 blank screens here." You just write everything, and then the really the I think the key to a good novel is those authors or their teams that are able to go back and pare them down into just really what the reader wants to read. And that was Elmore Leonard's big thing, right? How come your books are only 250 pages? I only write what the reader reads. I mean.
Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, again, another great showing. I can't wait to stay with Kira. I think Kira is definitely going to be, um, a protagonist or just a character that will stay around for a very long time. There's just a wealth of material, I think, to come ahead. With her personal life, her relationship with her father, and um, just is just a good, solid character.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to
Well,
continuing to follow her grow.
thank you. I mean, that was when my editor said, do you want to write another legal thriller, or we'd like you to write another legal thriller. I said, I don't want to write your traditional legal thriller. I want it to have part police procedural, and I want it to have part family dynamics. Because I wanted her to be as real as possible. And I think, we all, no matter what we do for a living, we also have to deal with, when our kids are sick or when the babysitter doesn't show up, and all those things in life. And that's really what I wanted. And Kira is in a dysfunctional family because of
Yeah.
alcoholism. And she's got to deal with that. So yeah, I just try to make the characters as well-rounded as possible by making sure that they have a life outside of what they do for a living.
Yeah, well, I think I've told you before. I mean, sometimes I can be a little bit of a reading snob, right? And that my favorite is literary fiction, and I like but I love, a good mystery, a good legal thriller. And I think for me, when you can marry those two things, it's a true home run, right? When I can get my fix of those, they really get into the gritty of an interesting story that's got a lot of emotional dynamic and multiple layers, and then you can still string me along with the mystery. That to me is just wow. It's a home run. It's such a satisfying,
Well, thank
series of
you.
hours, that I spend with you in this book.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I do appreciate that multi-layer down. There's too many. I don't mean this is a criticism, but I guess it probably is. But there's too many of the authors in that genre that are sticking very tight to the murder happens, the person figures it out, and maybe there's a lot of big, it's on the screen, exciting. Somebody's jumping off a cliff, kind of cinematic moments, but there's nothing at all real about it. There's nothing you can sink your teeth into, like a real story, like real people who have a messy life, and then
Yeah.
they're doing these things, right? There's many doctors who maybe they're a heart surgeon in one moment and they go home to an absolute, hot mess of a life,
Yeah.
right? And I just
Yeah.
think that if you can get that in your story, yeah, then that's a grand slam. So
Yeah.
so
Well,
as
thank you.
always, I applaud you.
Thank you.
And tell us when the next Kira installment's coming out.
Okay, so Beyond Reasonable Doubt will be out October 22nd. And then a book called Hold Strong, which is a World War II story about two young people. It's never been told before. It's based on a true story, two fictional characters. I had two gentlemen who are teachers and they're researchers. They did an incredible amount of research. Um, through twists and turns, came to me and asked me if I would help them, get the book over the finish line. So it's an incredible story of two people, Sam Carlson and Sarah Haber, from a small little town in Minnesota. Sam goes off to war, ends up in the Baton Death March, and she goes off and becomes a code breaker. She's brilliant in math. That'll be out in January, called Hold Strong. Then the next Tracy Crosswhite book will be coming out, I believe, in May. My agent just sent this to me, and that will be a Dead Draw will be out in May, and then Kira number three, Her Cold Justice, will be out in January of 2026. So a lot of things going on, and one of the things I have to always be careful of is not to try to do too much, not to try to write a literary novel, too often, because what ends up happening is there's too many months in between the Tracy books or too many months in between the Kira books. And there are some readers that really are waiting for those next books to come out. And I try to accommodate them. I try to keep it to like, every 9 months to kind of a thing. So anyway,
Wow. Well, again, I encourage anyone who hasn't read something of Robert Dugoni's to please go out and get it. This is a great place to start. I think the Kira books, because if you haven't read anything of his, it just started, right? Her Deadly
yeah,
Game's the first in the series. This is the
yeah.
second. This is a character who's going to be around for a long time.
Let's
Uh,
hope. From your lips to God's ears, right?
yeah, this is a great character. So,
Thank you.
and Bob always keeps everything interesting.
Thank you very
So,
much. Appreciate your kind words.
thank you, and thank you for coming, and I'll chase you back.
Great. Great. I enjoy coming on. So I'll see you on the next one.
You got it.
All
Thank you.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.